EQ, compression, reverb, delay. Am I using the right plugins? Should I be using a different mic? Should I be wearing different headphones? There are so many things that home studio producers are concerned about. But if you get this one thing wrong, then really none of these other things matter a whole lot. Now the reality is that the vast majority of home studio producers are making a mistake without even really realizing it, because here on the good old YouTubes, you're being told 100 different things about plugins, about gear, about compression science, about this, that, and the other thing. And half the time, one channel says the complete opposite as another. So it's really easy to think that your problems have something to do with one of those things. Here is the one mistake that I really don't hear people talking about, that is constantly on my mind when I'm making music that I'm gonna share with you. And it's not sexy, but if you can internalize this and apply it to your music making, then I can pretty much promise you, money back guaranteed, that it will help you. It's that most producers are not starting at the end. Whoa, 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 whoa. What on earth do you mean by that, Nathan? Starting from the end means that you start a production with the end goal in mind. This has everything to do with purpose and being goal-oriented. Now I wanna ask you this. When you start producing a song, do you have a vision for what that song is going to be that is more than just make it sound good? I mean, specifically, do you have specifics of what that means? What does a song that, quote, sounds good mean? What does that mean? What does that entail? What specific things make up a good sounding song for your song? Obviously, we can get into the conversation about like sonics and stuff, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Starting from the end means that you are essentially mapping out a picture of what specifically it's going to look like to get to where you're going. If you're opening your DAW and you have a song to produce and it's just like, well, we'll see what happens. I'm not gonna say that you absolutely cannot make great music doing that, because of course you can, but the people who can do that successfully are usually already very experienced and understand what we're talking about in this video, and they can just do the very thing I'm talking about on the fly. Imagine that you want to go on a road trip, right? You pack up the car, you get ready to go, and you start driving without a map. Now, if you just want to go experience things as they come, that's great, by all means, don't use a map. But if you want to go specifically to the Rocky Mountains, you should probably know if you're heading in the right direction, yeah? So a map is pretty useful. Producing with the end in mind means that you are working in a way that is structured to make decisions and choices that are all about getting somewhere specific, and most are not doing this. Most people are producing as if they're going on a road trip without a map. So the more you're flailing around, no matter how nice your mic is or how many plugins you have, you're gonna be stuck not actually really making the moves you should. You're gonna be tweaking and tinkering things that don't matter because you've got tunnel vision on things that don't matter because you're forgetting what the actual goal is, or you just never thought about it in the first place. And this means that when you're producing a song, you're thinking about the journey from start to finish. What's the listener gonna experience? What's gonna be keeping them engaged? What's making the song interesting from one moment to the next moment? How is the arrangement working in a way that keeps the song unique and dynamic? How are the vocals produced to make sure that it's emphasizing the lyrics and staying in the front? How are we utilizing, vocal doubling or harmonies or other vocal layering to create excitement? And how are we making sure that we're not overdoing that? How many of those questions had anything to do with plugins or gear or mixing? None, because you can answer any of those questions regardless of your gear. I could answer those questions and actually execute a song like that with nothing but a piano and vocals, because that question is actually based and focused on creating music and not on which EQ you're using. Now, I've done this more than once on the channel where I have demonstrated how you can produce great music with extremely limited resources. I've done it in GarageBand. That video has over 1 million views. I've done it using just Spitfire Labs. I've done it using just the Olaf Composer Toolbox. I've done it using nothing but stock sounds and plugins in Logic. And those videos have been seen by close to like 2 million people. Your gear is nothing more than a tool, and I think you should invest in good gear, by the way. That's a different topic for a different time, but I'm not against getting gear. But the point I'm making is that your gear is secondary to these questions. If you cannot produce with the end in mind, if you cannot be focused on what your end goal is, and then work accordingly, then you will constantly find yourself stuck. Now, am I saying that if you do this, you won't struggle? Of course not. There's a very practical piece of this, that there are varying degrees of skill set that experienced producers have that beginners don't. But the only way you develop that skill set is by practicing the right things. And watching 100 compression tutorials is not the answer for most of you. There's a really interesting thing where people talk about like practice makes perfect, right? And it's complete garbage. It's completely bogus. That's completely wrong. And the fact is that practice does not make perfect. Here's what it actually does. Practice forms habits. And you can form extremely bad habits by doing it the wrong way. So if you are constantly setting up things in your DAW where you're just flailing around, making decisions without actually considering the end, you are practicing, right? You're just practicing bad habits. The real thing you should be thinking about is not that practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. And so you need to be making sure that we are actually practicing the right things to actually improve. If you are practicing the wrong things, you can't be upset and disappointed that you're not improving in your skill set. set. You have to actually be focusing on the right things. And it's so much easier to focus on compression tutorials and EQ tutorials because it's more tangible. And by the way, I'm not saying that compression tutorials are evil or have no place. Heck, I have a couple of these on my channel and I go super deep in my course on this stuff. I think that we need to have a comprehensive view of how this whole thing works. But me and my team have given direct feedback to close to 1,000 songs from our students in the past 2 years. And this topic right here that we're talking about is one of the most important things that we try to teach our students. There are absolutely technical pieces to this conversation, like how to actually technically use a plugin, right? But I've seen over and over how many producers can have a very limited understanding of plugins, but still knock out great productions because they're focused on a vision for their song. They work on chipping away at that in a structured fashion. So let's get practical, shall we? I don't want to just talk about vision and have a vision, then I'll actually talk about how to actually execute that. How do we work in a way that is actually vision focused, that is focused on the end? Now, the big thing is that you need to make a sketched plan of what you want. Do this however you want. Like, you can write this on a piece of paper, you can do it in the notes of your DAW, you can do it mentally, whatever. Everyone's going to do this in your own way. I'm not telling you how to do this, but you do need to actually have a map of what's going to happen in your song from moment to moment. So here's what you want to do. You want to be thinking through this with each part of the song. So you might write out, verse 1, verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, etc., all the way through the entire song. And then I'm going to describe what I want that. I'm going to oftentimes do this with bullet points. I'm going to write out a paragraph or whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, whatever resonates with you. Maybe it's just bullet points. Maybe you actually write out like a pretty lengthy description, but you want to be as descriptive as you can, right? Like, it can be vague. It might just say intro, soft piano, soft strings, create an ethereal feeling. Boom. That's not super specific in the sense of like me writing out like a novel or anything like that, but it's enough that I can actually create something based on that one sentence. I could go sit down on my computer and create something with just those 3 bullet points, and it'll sound probably pretty much what I described, right? This process is not about creating wild limitations on yourself. It's actually about giving yourself objective things that you want. So here's some questions to think about when you're doing this. How is this section different from the previous section? How will this section push the song forward? How will this section vocally accomplish the lyrics? How will the drums push or pull on this section? Will this section be dynamically bigger or softer than the last section? Which section is the primary section? As in, which section is the climax? What emotions do you want your listener to feel in this section? And notice that I'm saying section. I'm not saying the whole song, because when we zoom out and say whole song, really easy to just kind of miss the point, because the whole point of this is the idea of actually thinking about the end in mind. Like, what is the actual listener going to experience? That's the end, right? Is the listener's experience. Then I'm thinking about how can I make it so that the listener's experience is such that they are enjoying it all the way through. And the way we do that is by making sure we are actually producing in a way that is focused on the sections and how those sections kind of like draw arrows to the next section and tie them together. Because if it sounds like the same all the way through, that's not interesting. See, if you're just laying tracks down without thinking about any of this, then it's way more likely that your song is gonna sound like a glorified loop. I cannot tell you how many songs we give feedback on where the guitar part is the exact same guitar part the entire song. The guitar part's the same all the way through. The vocals are treated the same all the way through. It's basically copy and paste. It's essentially a loop with some vocals on top. That's a great example of not producing with the end goal in mind, unless your end goal is to create a huge sense of repetition, which, maybe it is, but I highly doubt that's what most of you want unless you're creating ambient music. We're gonna, we can talk about that whole topic. We're not talking about ambient music. We're not talking about music that is like repetitious on purpose. That's a totally different thing. Because what ends up happening is you get going, you lay things down, and then you aren't considering the trajectory of that song in time and emotion. Because when someone listens to your song, they start at the beginning and they move towards the end, right? Like, that's the only natural way to listen to a song. That means that every second that passes in your song should be doing something to encourage that listener to make it to the end. This is why the end matters, like I said. Now, not just the end as in the end of the song, but the end as in the end goal. Because if the end goal is someone listens to the whole song and loves it and then wants to go back and listen to it again, and that means the way that you produce that song needs to be focused on actually accomplishing that. Now, this is so much more valuable than most of you realize, because most of you are inundated with tutorials that focus on the how and not the why. Like, why are you making the choices that you're making? Be intentional. And yes, the how matters, but not nearly as much as the why. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. Teaching someone how EQ works, to be completely frank, it's not hard. Like, I hate to be blunt, it's not complicated. You can learn how EQ works in a pretty short amount of time. Like, you could watch like a 10-minute video and be like, okay, like I think I understand how it works. Now, that doesn't mean that you're gonna be an expert at application or when and why you should use it, but it's not a difficult thing to talk about. The more difficult things are actually this. Why are they doing what they're doing? Like, why would you use EQ in this specific example? Why would you use it on a vocal? Why would you use it on a bass? Why would you use it on a snare? Why? That's the hardest thing. And then to just pull this back even further, why is verse 2 a direct copy of verse 1? fun? Probably shouldn't be. Believe it or not, making great music is less technical than you think. If you think that the best producers are focusing all their time and energy on mega technical stuff that's all secretive, you're wrong. I've worked with some of them. Forrest Whitehead, he's got several #1 hits, couple Grammy nominations. We've worked on music together, and guess what? The vast majority of the time is spent on arrangement and choosing great sounds and making every moment interesting, not with mixing hacks or tricks, but with better musical decisions, with better arrangement. The best producers are just better at the fundamentals than you are. So many amateur producers out there think that they're like these secret tips that professionals know that you don't. And yes, of course, there are unique things that they're gonna know that you won't. But like 90% of the time that we're spending on things, it's just genuinely just fundamental things. Better composition, better sound selection, better arrangement, getting better performances, editing our material, all that, etc., etc. And that's just it. You need to realize that our job as producers is about capturing magic with music. The tools we use, who cares? Who cares if I use a hammer or a screwdriver? Your audience doesn't give a crap. The only ones who do are usually the ones who have nothing better to do than write trash comments. Your audience doesn't care that you used a $5,000 mic or a $200 mic. Your audience cares if they feel something. And I think that's actually why a lot of times it's usually like the rough mix that gets picked by the artist for the release over version 15. I mean, this happened to me with an artist I produced a while back. Like I did 10 mix revisions, and when it was all said and done, the artist asked to go back to release version 2. And guess what? I told him that that was probably gonna happen when we got to version 4 or 5. Like if we keep going, you know, version 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're just gonna wanna go back. Because just throwing more plugins and more technical junk at your music isn't what your audience cares about. In fact, the more time you spend going down that rabbit hole, oftentimes it's the further away you're gonna find yourself from the actual intent of the song because you went way out in left field because you got distracted like a puppy seeing a squirrel. When you make music, are you making it to stroke your ego as a technical wizard, or are you making it to express something musically that's ultimately about your listener? Because trust me, I've heard a lot of producers brag about how much they know about plugins and compression and EQ, and their music still sucks. I think we've all seen those people. So when you're producing next, focus on the end. Focus on what the end result is going to be and make every move about getting one step closer to that goal. So if you want to see how I actually practically go about planning and doing the execution of this from a production start to finish, I have a free workshop where I cover my production roadmap. It's very deep, way deeper than I go here. It's helped thousands of producers already. You can watch that for free right here. We'll see you there.